Welcome to Leaving Nothing to Chance, your go-to podcast where we bring you insights from some of the most influential voices in small business and personal development. Each week, we dive deep into conversations with top thought leaders, authors, and business moguls from around the world, sharing their secrets to success and strategies for growth. Tune in for exclusive content that will inspire, motivate, and equip you to take your journey to the next level. This is Leaving Nothing to Chance.
Hello, everybody. I want to welcome Dr. Michael Haley today. And Doc, let's just start at the top. Tell people a little bit about yourself.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me on your show. Well, I'm a doctor of chiropractic and also the founder of Haley Nutrition. Haley named after my name, but we're a nutrition company. We help people get well. We make products that really no one else is making, and we're helping people get well.
And, Doc, I got so many questions for you. First one being food in ancient times versus today.
A lot of the stuff that we see in the stores that we buy as food, I have a hard time agreeing that it's actually food. It's more like substances. And I like to think back what was available to people even just 150 years ago, or go way back, a couple thousand years ago. When we look in biblical times, what were they consuming? What were the things that people ate? And it was perishable, and it was often, alive. They, along the way, maybe discovered a few things, like some things ferment and that preserves it, and that was okay. But for the most part, what it didn't have is chemicals in it. So what we're trying to teach people is to really get back to real food, things that existed a couple thousand years ago, or even just 150 years ago. It didn't come in packages. It didn't sit on a shelf. If it was on a shelf for longer than a couple days, it would change. It would go bad. So we try to get people thinking back in terms of what was it like. Now, I'm going to use a couple more criteria than that, though, than just did it exist, because we might say, well, beef existed a couple hundred years ago or a couple thousand years ago, and they consumed it. Yeah, but then let's look at it traditionally. Traditionally, the cows were out in the fields eating grass, and that's very different than the beef you're buying now, unless it's truly 100% grass-fed. And you'll notice it, like if you consume dairy and you buy milk from a grass-fed cow, it has a little bit of a yellow tint to it. That's nutrients from the grass. Versus cows that are fed grain, and you get like a very bright white milk. So we'd like to go back and say, okay, did it exist? And then how did it exist? And then we'll also maybe add a scientific component to that and say, scientifically, what do we know about this now? Well, we know that grass-fed beef and other products made from that same animal is going to be much healthier and even anti-cancer and more anti-inflammatory than the things that are fed the grain. So we look using those criteria, and you start learning what real food really is.
And real food, that's a great example, because real food versus what we have today with all the processed food. And I was talking to another healthcare leader yesterday. I was interviewing, and I said, it's interesting. I'm a fan of old movies, and old movies being like, Hitchcock from the early 60s. I mean, they're not that old. But the majority of actors and actresses, occasionally you saw one that was overweight, but for the most part, even though they smoked like chimneys in these movies, you generally didn't see people overweight. Do you think that that's all because of the processed food that came along that we all grew up on?
I actually do. I'm sure there's other contributing factors, such as the availability of food. And now it's more available than ever before. But I remember watching documentaries from like the 20s, and wow, not a single overweight person in those documentaries. None.
And what do we do with kids? You know, like one of my hobbies, I throw shot puts and discuses, even though I'm way past my prime, but I do it for exercise. And there's a school around the corner here I go to sometimes in the morning, and I'll be out throwing, and I'll notice that their equivalent of gym class, which you and I wouldn't think of gym class that we grew up with, right, where we actually did something, is like they'll walk around the track all on their cell phones. And I noticed some of these children, and I'm talking, this is a middle school, so they're seventh and eighth grade, so they're 12, 13, 14-year-old kids. A lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them have guts on them, the boys and the girls. How do you
Yeah.
educate mom and dad to say, you know, ring dings, ding dongs, and McDonald's is not food, and you're killing your kid. You're not helping your kid. Yes, you're giving them calories, but you're not giving them sustenance that they're going to flourish on academically, athletically, or any other way that's going to be significant in their life. How do you get through to these people?
Yeah, and I think it's more than that too. I think the other thing we lost is the family sit down dinner where you're actually eating together and you're actually chewing your food and you're experiencing it. You're taking your time and you might sit down at the dinner table with your family for 45 minutes or an hour, enjoying the conversation and enjoying the food. And what ends up happening, because you're not eating so fast now, you're actually experiencing the nutrition and you stop when you have that satiety, you reach that. Modern day lifestyle never gives us the opportunity to really experience that. A lot of families are broken and they're not sitting down at the dinner table together. They're just eating from the, packaged ding dongs, like you say.
And how do you teach people about the 5 facets of health? I listened to a show that you did on that. Love for you to go through each of them, little synopsis on each.
John, I had someone on my podcast yesterday, and he had this very rare condition that went undiagnosed for like 10 years. And then finally, they gave it a diagnosis based on the symptoms. There's no really to test it and prove that even that is the diagnosis. All the medications in those 10 years failed anyway. And the 5 facets of health would really say, okay, what can you do about your health today? Do you even need a diagnosis? Does it matter? Or maybe you just want to stay healthy so you never have a diagnosis. What can you do today? And we would look at things like nutrition, your exercise, your rest, your mental well being. As a chiropractor, we'll recognize a fifth one, and that being the nerve flow, which really has to do with not having the stress in your body that would choke nerves that go out to all of your organs. And that's a real thing. Just like you can get numbness in your toes or your fingertips or going down your arm, you can actually have a nerve that is going to an organ that's not sending the signal back and forth as well because of the tension. So those are the 5 facets. And the guy that was on my podcast, he realized that primarily by changing his nutrition, he was able to get well from something that could never even be accurately diagnosed. So that's kind of the concept. A lot of people have fears, do I have cancer? Well, yeah, everyone does. We all have cancer cells. At some point in time, we might call it cancer. So why don't you just start taking care of yourself now and not worry about it? Don't go get a diagnosis. I'm not saying don't go to doctors, but you should never get to the point where you need it because you are in control for the most part when it comes to your health. And those are the things you can do today. It's a lot more complicated than that. Like you can take nutrition. A lot of people think of nutrition. I ate, fruits and vegetables. I ate my nutrition. You ate fruits and vegetables. What your body did with it, the body chemistry that is made from that, that's your nutrition. And you might not even be absorbing it because it all works together. Your mind affects how your digestion works. And you can actually change chemistry by the way you think. Laughter makes good chemistry. Anger makes negative chemistry. You're making good or bad nutrition with your thoughts. When you sleep, your chemistry changes. So it's really about a lifestyle of healthy chemistry when it comes to your nutrition. Eating is part of that.
Jack LaLanne used to have a great statement, right? That nutrition was king, exercise is queen. You put them together, you got a kingdom. And that's what you just described there, right? I mean, you take nutrition, rest, mental well-being, exercise, and properly functioning nervous system by chiropractic care, stretching, et cetera, and yeah, you can beat a lot of things for a long period of time if you do those things on a consistent basis. So here's the magic question, though, Doc. How do we get people off the couch and to the gym or to the track or on the bicycle, or how do we get people to get going again, right? The person who's listening to us and says, that all sounds great. I really want to be healthy, but Dancing with the Stars is on tonight. Can't go for that walk around the block, or whatever, as we speak. I think the NCAA basketball tournament's on tonight. That's really important. Well, if your kid's playing, it is, but if he's not playing, record the darn thing and come and watch it tomorrow, right? If you really got to watch the game, So how do you get through to people?
It certainly is priorities, right? But I think also people are drawn to certain people. So you or I could definitely be influencing the people around us by the examples we set, and quite possibly they see the energy you have and they want to have that same energy and they want to start copying the things that you're doing. Maybe it isn't that. Maybe they really just need to make a decision and make a change. Now, we develop habits, and some of our habits are beneficial and some of them aren't. It might be time to start developing good habits. And you don't have to go to the gym for 45 minutes 3 times a week. Maybe that's a good target, but you don't have to do that to start. You can start with, I'm going to do an exercise snack twice a day where I get up and do jumping jacks. And, eventually those little exercise snacks get bigger and bigger because you start feeling better and you want to make them a bigger part of your life. And then maybe you are going to the gym 3 times a week for 45 minutes or an hour. We have to start somewhere. But I think it's making the habits and also being inspired by people that are doing it right and recognizing how it's helping them.
I love what you said there, because micro workouts are something I believe in. It's like I've got all sorts of different gadgets here, right in my office. I got a yoga mat behind me here, and I got a couple of other things. I got these old like duck pins like they used to bowl with that have handles on them that I can just swing, move my shoulders and all that, because I'm on, like yourself, I'm on the phone a lot. I'm doing podcasts. I'm doing regular business stuff on Zooms. So sometimes I'm in my office 9-10 hours a day. If I don't move my body, I'm stiff as a board. So I'll go out between stuff and just do something. I've got an old cinder block, for example, in the driveway. I'll just go out and I'll do a couple sets of curls. Right? I don't know what the thing weighs. It's just to move once again, to move the body.
Sure.
Get people doing that. But let me ask you a different.
Wait, can I ask you something? What do you do for fun that is energizing?
I am a gym rat. Okay, I got to be honest. I'm there first thing in the morning. At least 5 days a week. And I'm up early. I'm a 4 a.m. guy that I'm up, and I want to get there because I don't want the noise of the day. You know what I mean? Like I want to get up, I want to stretch a little bit, eat a little bit, get to the gym, get my workout with that early morning crowd, and be back here by about 7, so I can really, get about my business day. The other thing I do, believe it or not, is I'm a cold water dipper. I got into that during COVID by accident. We had a storm here. We had the I forget what they called this thing, but it was like a once in a lifetime storm for Dallas. 5 days in a row, below 30 degrees, everything was frozen.
I remember.
Crazy, crazy. So my pool froze. Well, as my pool defrosted, I was like, you know what? I'm going to get in there, and I got in there. I'm going to die. I'm going to get pneumonia. I got out. I felt great here, mentally. Physically, I was cold, but mentally, I was like, wow, that was really interesting. Keep in mind what we were all going through during COVID. I never got it, fortunately, but at the end of the day, we were all going through this like, hey, is the world ever going to be back to any normalcy? And that started me, and I have not missed a day since. And I travel all over the world, and if I do, I take a cold shower, or I find a cold therapy place that I can go take a dip in. And I became almost religious about it. I've got a refrigerator inside for the warm weather, and then my pool for the colder months here. So yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah, and the reason I asked is because you want it to be enjoyable. And for me, I like to play pickleball with my wife a few times a week, and we work up a good sweat, and it's energizing. But I don't really consider that the full workout that I would want to get. So, like you, I'm hitting the gym. I get up at 4 a.m. I'm often there by 5:30, and might stay 45 minutes or an hour to get a good workout. I don't stay as long as you because I have to get home and play my drums for an hour. To me, that's exercise. It's more sweating and work, and I'm having a good time doing things that I enjoy. Getting in shape or exercising activity, it doesn't have to be laborious. It can be something you enjoy doing.
Doc, you're making a great point, like about the drums, for example. I watched Dan Buettner, big fan of Dan and what he's done over the years with the Blue Zones. And when he goes into these communities of sometimes people that are over 100, in some cases they don't even know how old they really are because they're in places unlike our country where we keep track of this stuff, right? And some of these people, it's just they enjoy walking up the hill to see their friend that lives on the top of the hill, and they do that every day. And then you look at the hill and you go, "Wow, that's a hill." I mean, that's a small mountain in Switzerland or Italy or Greece or some of these places that he goes. And it's a great point to do something that you enjoy. Like if you hate going to the gym, I tell people don't go to the gym. Like one of the other things to answer your question that I enjoy is I love to do farmers walks. I love to work my shoulders. And I've got two farmers walk bars. They're two 45-pound bars basically that are made for farmers walks. And I'll go to a park sometimes and I'll just kind of go, okay, the furthest light that I can see, light standard, it's holding a street light. That's my first stop. Turn around, come back, drop the bars at my truck, and then just walk it, right? Sometimes forward, sometimes backwards, so I can work my posterior chain. And then I'll go to the second closest one, the third closest one, and that's a workout. And that's about 45 minutes. And to your point about sweat, you don't need to do a whole lot more that day, But find stuff. I got a punching bag in my backyard also. Sometimes I go out and I'll just, do a few rounds, just once again, good for the brain, right? Because you're working right side, you're working left side, you're working both sides of the brain. Just do something that you enjoy. If it's laborious, you're not going to do it long term.
I want to unpack a few of the things that you said because you were talking about the right and the left, and there's brain work and exercise. You talked about sweating, which is detoxification. You talked about going a distance, which is endurance. There's flexibility training, there's strength training, there's all different levels of physical fitness, and it's great when you have activity that really incorporates a lot of those. So I thought that was neat.
Thank you. So let me ask you another thing. This is a fascinating subject, right? We're always talking and we see marketing all the time about anti-aging. How do we age slower? I realize we can't stop the clock, right? And we probably don't want to, right? I mean, there's a point where, we all are going to get older, but how do we slow it down so we have a better quality of life?
Yeah, and I don't know if it's slowing it down or just being able to do more during those years. Meaning, for all we know, our days are numbered, and there's a time when we're making an exit. But it's really how are we going to live between now and then? How can we maximize our potential between now and then? You've heard the story. What are you going to do with the dash on your tombstone between the day you were born and the day you die? And I want to live my dash very well, healthy, and energetic. Now, there are a lot of cool nutrients, foods, things that we consume that, will quench free radicals. There's things we can consume that will stimulate the use of stem cells. Stem cells will go out and essentially replace bad cells, so that when we're turning over our body and things are replacing itself, you're actually making pretty good copies. You're still making copies. Back in the day, do you remember the old copy machines? They were like thermal paper, and if you took a copy and you put it on the glass and you made a copy of the copy, about 10 copies later, forget it. But now copiers got better, so it's still losing a little bit of quality every time it makes a copy, but they're a lot cleaner copies. And that's kind of what we want to do when it comes to our bodies. We want to, as we're turning over cells, making copies, we want our copies to be made good. We want them made well. And it has a lot to do with what we're consuming nutritionally, what we're consuming in our minds, the programming that we're taking in. We're all being programmed. It has to do with, living a healthy lifestyle and choosing good options.
What would be the top 3 foods on a daily basis?
I'm biased. I can't answer that one fairly.
Okay. Okay. Well, they don't have to do it, but what would you suggest?
My first food of the day. Well, actually, I do admit I do cheat, and I have a little bit of a tasty, an organic coffee with coconut milk and a little, protein powder that it's low carbohydrate, and I just like the taste of it. So that's my treat. But shortly after, my first true nutrition is a glass of raw aloe vera every day. And that happens to be one of those super anti-aging foods. Great for your gut, helps your gut absorb your nutrients better, very immune boosting. So for me, that's my number one superfood. When it comes to other things, I can name some of my favorite foods, but we're all different. And what works for me, I'm somewhat Italian. And my family grew up eating lots of pasta and red sauce and meat. And my body actually does well on those things. But if someone else had that, that could cause all kinds of problems. Maybe they didn't have that in their heritage and their, ancestors. So finding the foods that work for you is critical. But for me, I consume a ton of salads, fruits, vegetables, meats, and I do very well on dairy foods. So, for me, it's real food, no chemicals, but the aloe, that's my number one.
Well, and we started out talking about ancient foods, right? I mean, aloe vera mentioned in the Bible numerous times, right? Going back. So the Old Testament. So been here for a while, needless to say. We're lucky in Texas, by the way. It grows pretty wild around here. So, and
Yeah.
I've cut myself different times, doing stuff. And my kids, when they were little, there's an aloe vera plant that a neighbor of mine had about 3 doors up. And I went up and I broke off the leaf at the top. And I took it on, and my son's like, Dad, what are you doing? I said, watch tomorrow. This cut will be gone. It wasn't a deep cut, but it was good enough, right? And my neighbor probably wasn't too happy I took his aloe vera, but it grows back, fortunately. But point being, it's like there's just nothing more healing. And I'm a big fan of aloe vera, by the way, myself. So been drinking it off and on for 40 some odd years. But let me ask you about some other things. You mentioned aloe vera. That was on my list. How are you on methylene blue? This seems to be a topic that is just blown up on the internet.
Yeah, that's one that I personally haven't tried yet. My wife has. And just very, very recently, because it's kind of new, I haven't had a chance to study it. It's funny, though. You can tell me methylene blue, and I'm thinking, okay, methylene, that's a carbon with 3 hydrogens. The ene means it has a double bond to something, and I could draw it in my mind, but I'm also thinking of it chemically. I am a little cautious on things that are really more chemical. I don't know where it comes from. Where did we get it before it came in a dropper bottle? How was it in our food supply? So that's kind of how I look at things. But if I research it and get more educated on it, I might change my mind on it. And I think there's also a difference between using something to treat a disease and to things that would actually prevent a disease.
I haven't used it yet either, just to be transparent about it. I actually bought it from a company in Saskatchewan, and it's taken like 6 weeks with all the stuff going on the border to get it here. So I'm going to try it. I don't know what it's going to do, but I have a friend down your way, actually, in West Palm, who just swears by it. So I'm like, try it, right? Like anything, try it for a bit, see what it does, and all our bodies are different. Red light therapy. I know we have a mutual friend who's very famous in that field, Dr. Carl Rothschild. But obviously, you're a fan. But tell me your experience with red light.
Yeah, and well, first of all, if we dumb it down and look at something like sunlight, we recognize that there's a definite benefit to getting a decent amount of sun. Too much can be harmful because of certain rays that you're being exposed to. And when you go outside, you're really exposed to the full electromagnetic spectrum, everywhere from gamma rays to radio waves. But there's a little sliver of visible light, and within that little sliver, there's a certain light that has healing benefits, and that's your red light, and you're not getting the harmful gamma rays and ultraviolet rays that are going to burn you. So you can actually get a lot more of that light benefit without the harmful rays from being outside in the sun too long. So that's kind of the concept with it. And yes, there's no coincidence to, the fact that we go to the trade shows and there's so many people competing for the red light business.
It is huge. It's blowing up big time. Cold water therapy. I know I mentioned I'm a fan of it. You're a fan?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I remember, like you, the first time that I got in the cold water, and the first time it was tough. I don't love the first 30 seconds, but then you can just settle in. And when you get out, you feel amazing. Now, I've heard that there's probably not much benefit beyond 2 or 3 minutes. But it's funny, you can get in water that's 45 degrees and you can sit in there for 20 minutes and get out and still not feel cold. You feel cold those initial few minutes. But once you get out, you just feel amazing. I absolutely love it. I'm not sure of the benefits either. I'm not sure what the big benefit is. I have some theories. Sometimes when you do things that you don't want to do, it kind of empowers you to do more things that you don't want to do, but you should be doing, like eating well and maintaining a healthy weight and going to the gym. The more you practice these things, it's kind of like, when you fast, if you fast for spiritual reasons, there's benefits that seem to cross over into the physical because now you have more self-control in the choices you're making throughout the rest of your life, in all areas of your life. I think the cold plunge is doing that. I don't know what else it's doing. My wife and I have both experienced a few weird things where we said, could that be because of the cold plunge? I'd love to tell you about them, but it's more of what she experienced, and I'm not going to because it's her personal area. But it was like, wow, is that possible? Is the cold plunge making that change? So I think it's amazing.
Oh, wow, I'm a huge fan, and became a fan of Wim after I was doing it. I had heard of him, and then a few weeks after I started doing it, I saw him on Real Sports on Brian Gumbel's show. And then after that, I read a book by a Danish doctor that's translated into English, and that Danish doctor, it talked more about cold water swimming, which is becoming a big deal, by the way. They're like doing cold water swimming events now in Virginia every year and everything else in like the middle of January. But anyway, she made an interesting point. Up until modern plumbing, everybody cold plunged because if you went in the river to wash yourself, right? If you were, a settler and you were crossing America, how did you take a bath? There weren't one. You went into cold, right? So it was when modern plumbing again came, right? To your point about ancient foods too. It's like, did we help people with all of this, or did we hurt them because we kind of weakened their immune system? I think by making them nice and warm all the time, and then the second they're exposed to cold, they get a flu or sick, right? So anyway,
Probably.
a couple other questions along those lines, Doc. Breath work. we as Americans, I'm told, do not breathe the way that we should, that some of our European friends probably are taught to breathe a little better. You want to talk about that a little?
You know, I'm convicted right now by the fact that you mention it because I haven't practiced breath work in a while. But when I do take time to breathe and use my full breath, it's very rewarding and it makes you realize how little bit you're using in that range of the full breath. The other thing that I think is really neat about it, when you do take that time to breathe, if right now everyone just takes a nice deep breath all the way in and then holds it, and then let it out fully all the way to the bottom of that breath. And then come back to your normal breath. We probably all that did that just forgot about the stresses of life. We probably all just reconnected with our body, and all of a sudden we're here in the present, hearing everything I'm saying. So there's not only, the stale breath from not using the full expansion of the lungs, there's the mind connection that happens with life. And you've heard people say when they see someone that's stressed or, injured or something like that, breathe, breathe. Yeah. Stop, pause, take a nice deep breath, reconnect, be back in the present. We all need to do that more. And I'm convicted because you mentioned it's like, oh, Mike, you forgot about that. You're not doing it.
Same here. Same here. My sister is a yogi in New York, and she's always telling me, you just need to breathe more. And I do when I get in the cold, because you have to sometimes, right? Because that cold hits you, and it's like, okay, you got to do the breath work. But after that, the rest of the day, I don't. And yeah, so I'm with you. I'm with you. Easy. Sometimes easier to talk about this stuff than do it, right? You mentioned. Are you?
I have a friend that applied it to his son's golf game. And he essentially, his son wanted to make the team, and his score was miserable. And he just said, hey, you're going to take one deep breath before every shot. And he'd get up there, and before swinging the club, he'd just and reconnect. And, he knocked like 10 strokes off his golf game. It affects us in so many ways. Breathe. Sorry for interrupting, but.
No, great point. Great story. Fasting.
Yeah. Yeah. Fasting is one of those things for me. It's something that when I get out of the habit, I find myself making worse choices in life. And it's that practice for me of saying no to something. Well, you can't really fast from air. You need to breathe. You can't really fast from water for too long because you need to be hydrated. And I think scripturally, the reason food was something that we would fast from, it's because just like water and air, our bodies cry out for it. We want to eat, and it's kind of built in us for survival. But we certainly don't need it to the extent that we need water or air, and we can say no to it for a period of time and disobey our desires without getting into trouble. And the more you disobey your desires, the easier it is to say no to desires that you should disobey. It just crosses over into all areas of your life. So to me, that's the big benefit of fasting. There's different kinds of fasts too. Some people, there's in the scriptures, there's a Daniel fast where, they had chosen to eat nothing but vegetables for 10 days and then, test and see if your servants aren't healthier than everyone else. So there's different kinds of fasts. For me, the best kind would be, choosing maybe a whole day, not 24 hours, but, from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed, you say no to food. For some people, it might be 2 or 3 days. Now, there's also significant health benefits. When you get into that fat burning mode, your body will have a propensity for taking the the visceral fat, the toxins in your body and getting those out. It's not just, now I'm burning fat to lose weight, but you're actually getting rid of the stuff that you should get rid of most importantly. So there's that benefit too. But for me, I like the spiritual benefit better.
So let's come back now. You've got some products that you manufacture. Let's talk about some of the products that you offer, you can offer to some of our listeners.
Yeah, our number one thing, and it's no coincidence that if you're seeing this on YouTube, there's a field of aloe vera behind me. And that actually, I'm a chiropractor. That came out of one of my patients that would tell me, anyone that has this certain illness should be drinking this and they'll get well. Now, not everybody got well, but a lot of people did from this horrible disease. And about that time, I had a patient that had this terrible disease, the worst kind. With the statistic that you have about a 2% chance of being here this time next year. This guy says drink 3 glasses of aloe and you'll be fine, but let's make a lot more changes. And we changed her whole diet and had her, growing and eating sprouts and drinking the aloe and no more cakes and all those things. And that was about 16 years ago, and she is still cancer-free. Now, I don't think the aloe cured her. I think there's reasons why the aloe helped her. And I think a lot of the nutrition really helped her. Only you can cure cancer. There is no cure for cancer. Medicine can't cure cancer. But food can certainly help our bodies work more like it's supposed to. So I became very passionate about the aloe vera plant from that experience. And about that same time, the person that was coming to my office, my patient, Rodney Stockton, at 96 years old, he had a heart attack and he died. And in the midline of her needing that aloe for supporting her immune system, he died, and the company started disappearing, and the aloe was harder to get. So I didn't choose aloe, it chose me, and I had to rescue that product line because I realized how important it was. So that's our number one product. It's a raw, frozen, not pasteurized, not heated, no chemicals in it. The only thing that's inside the bottle is the inner part of the aloe leaf, and it's kept frozen because otherwise it will it'll change. It'll break itself down and become thin like a lot of them that are on the shelf. Not that they're not beneficial, but keeping it in its most plant-like form seems to be a lot better.
And grown right there in Florida?
Well, we grow the plants in Florida that we can ship to people, but just like you have it in Texas there, you'll notice that it kind of goes dormant in the wintertime, even here in Florida. It's like, what? Doesn't it stay hot in Florida? Yes, it does. It goes from 100 degrees to like maybe in the 70s in the wintertime, and that's enough to make the aloe pretty much go dormant and not grow full year round. We are harvesting for our production currently in Guatemala. We were in Dominican Republic until just the past, 4 months now. And we're actually out of aloe vera. During this time that we're recording right now, I'm going to have a freight container full. We've been out for 4 months. Frozen container will be essentially on the other side of the wall behind me, hopefully in the next 15 minutes. That's my expectation. So we'll have it again as soon as it passes the laboratory testing.
What are your additional products?
The other ones are really for me. No one buy them because if you do, I'll have less. No, we keep on remaking them. But truthfully, I realized that my business did need other products to be kind of keep it stable during, the frozen aloe, raw aloe is kind of a volatile business to be in. Frozen food industry is not a consistent business. It's tough. And I was using these other products that friends of mine were making, some chiropractors. And when their when they had their business struggles and some, the trademark disputes and things like that, they threw in the towel, but I needed these products. And it was their protein, which is a very clean vegan protein, and their powdered fruits and vegetables, which everyone should have a scoop of powdered fruits and vegetables every day. And there's a lot of brands. I happen to be very fond of the one I currently sell at HaleyNutrition.com. And it happens to be the one that I was using. And again, it was out of, I have to save that brand because they're going away. So we essentially bailed that out so that I could continue to have that product for myself. I didn't care if I ever sold a single can of it. I needed it for me in both cases of the greens and the protein. So those are our other main products. And then from the aloe vera, we make a topical aloe cream, which is out of this world.
So you,
which, it's funny. I use it every day. I'm, it's sitting here right here on my desk.
you were kind of forced into entrepreneurship as a chiropractor because of products that you liked. You said, "Hey, I got to save these brands," which is a great story in itself.
It's and literally all of the products. Absolutely. The aloe cream, it's funny because this one, before I was in the business, and Rodney, you need a doctor face on the brand and you're perfect for it. I would always say no because I was a busy chiropractor at the time. And the former version of this, I remember I was sailing. I didn't know anything about sailing. I went sailing and the captain, told me to pull up the sail. And I remember pulling the rope and we were in a race. I don't know what I'm doing in a race, not knowing how to sail. But I pull up the sail and I kind of look at him like, what do I do now? And that's when he realized that I didn't know anything about sailing. And because I was supposed to lock down the rope, and as the wind filled the sail, I'm trying to hold it, and the rope ripped through my hands and my skin melted. And it was actually his aloe product at the time that he said, just, soak your hands in this stuff. And I remember looking at my hands literally 3 days later and saying, my goodness, the skin on my hands looks better than before the rope burns in 3 days. And it was just a weird thing. And I remember I gave him my testimonial on the aloe cream, never thinking I would ever be rescuing his products.
So, Doc, last two questions to wrap up for today. Okay, tell them about your podcast.
Oh, the Dr. Haley Show podcast. We like to talk about some of the more freaky things when it comes to health and nutrition, and the things that are maybe considered conspiracy theory 6 months ago. That's the kind of thing that we're talking about.
Yeah, we could talk about a lot of subjects on that. And how do they reach you? If somebody wants to reach you either for chiropractic care if they're there in the Fort Lauderdale area, or for your products, brands, advice, consulting.
Yeah, the easiest way is HaleyNutrition.com. There's a contact form, and every time someone fills out that contact, I actually get a copy of it to my email. Someone's going to address it, but if it's addressed to Dr. Haley, I see it personally. And yeah, I'm easy to get on the phone as well. I can't always take the phone call, but if someone wants to talk to me, whoever answers has a calendar for me for making phone appointments, and we'll do a 15-minute call back.
Great. Well, Doc, this has been a pleasure. And any last words?
Man, thank you for doing what you're doing. I really appreciate you having me on the show. I enjoy the conversation. I love talking with like-minded people that are doing the same thing.
You know what? I mean, there's not enough of us, but I think there's more of us now than there were a few years ago. I think a lot of things happening, including COVID, opened a lot of people's eyes that, our health is our responsibility, right? We can't always count on somebody else to make those decisions for us. So I appreciate what you're doing, and you're a leader, a thought leader, and a business leader, as well as a health leader. And we need all three in our country right now.
Oh, amen. Thank you, John.